In October of 1901, on Blackjack Ridge above a hollow they called Sutter's Draw, the miners sealed a lead shaft with their own hands and carried the reason to their graves. Start here. First light, frost white on the ground, and a man named Ephraim Cobb standing alone at the mouth of that shaft, foreman of the lead crew. He came up before the others, the way he always did, to feel the mine breathe before he sent men down into it. And that morning, the mine breathed wrong. Warm air, wet air, pushing up out of the black hole in the ground and curling into the cold like smoke. You'd have felt it before you understood it. Warm, wet air where the cold should be. A shaft dug that deep breathes cold. It doesn't come up warm and damp on a frost morning like something with lungs. But that one did. Let me set the place plain for you. Sutter's Draw was a scatter of galena diggings, gray lead ore that glittered under a lamp, a company store, a handful of tie-hack cabins tucked in the fog, and a crew of maybe 9 men who went down by lantern every morning into the lead and came up black and tired at dusk. That was the whole of it. Now, Cobb was not a man to spook. Deacon's son, sober, church-going, hard as the rock he worked. He didn't tell tales, and he didn't hold with those who did. And that's just why what came later stuck to that county like tar. Because when a man like Ephraim Cobb tells you a thing, you believe him. First, it was the sound. Listen close now, the way the old-timers told it, because the knocking is where this turns. Down at the 60-foot level, off past where any man had a pick in the rock, there came a knocking. Slow, even, patient, a knock and a pause, and a knock, steady as a clock nobody wound. Like something in the stone keeping time. Cobb stood in that drift with his lamp, and he listened, and for the life of him, he could not name what keeps such steady time in solid rock. The knocking wasn't the worst of it. An old well-witch named Merle Tandy climbed the ridge and told Cobb to seal the shaft and go home that very day, because his own daddy had walled off a drift on that same seam back in '58 and never once said why. Merle Tandy had witched wells in that county 40 years, and he did not scare easy, so when he stood at the shaft mouth and told Cobb to seal it and go home, that his own daddy had walled off a drift on that same seam in '58 and carried the reason to his grave, a wiser man would have listened. Cobb didn't. He waved the old man off, sent him back down the ridge with his forked stick and his warning, and the knocking went on. It came closer, night by night, through November. Slow, patient, even, like something in the rock keeping time, and drawing nearer to the pick with every strike. Then there was the boy, Isham Cobb, Ephraim's young nephew, no more than 14, put his lantern to a seep in the wall at the 60-foot level. And he swore to his dying day, that he saw the rock rise and fall, slow, like a flank drawing breath. Put yourself down there with the boy, lantern up, and the wall breathing back at you. That's when the smell came. Warm damp coming off the stone, and on it, the smell of blood and wet iron. That was the thing no man could argue away. You can call a sound your nerves. You can call a shadow bad light. But you cannot talk yourself out of a smell like that, so close it warms your face. 2 men flat refused to go down after that. Just wouldn't do it. And the crew that had gone into the lead easy every morning started to fray. They kept the lamps close now, kept them set facing into the dark, so nothing could come up on them from the deep end without crossing the light first. They say every crew has the night it stops being a story. This was theirs. His name was Dell, a mucker, one of the men who hauled the broken rock back out. On a Tuesday, he was working the deep face, and then he wasn't. No cave-in, no cry, no sound at all that any man heard. What they found was worse than a body. His lantern, still burning upright on the ground, steady flame and all, one boot beside it, and a long smear leading back into a crack in the rock, a crack too narrow for any man to fit. Cobb went down alone with a single lamp to find him. What he found behind that loose rock face he told only once, to the preacher, on his deathbed. And it was not a cave, and Dell had not been dragged. One lamp, one man, alone at the deep face. And what Ephraim Cobb told the preacher before he died was this: the seep was never a seep. Behind the loose stone, the shaft opened into a hollow no tool had ever cut, and something vast was folded down in that dark breathing. It had been breathing in that rock long before the first pick ever struck it. Dell hadn't been dragged in. That was the thing Cobb couldn't shake. There was no cave-in, no cry, no drag marks a struggle leaves. Dell had been drawn, the way water finds a low place. Understand what he meant. The thing never chased anyone. It only waited. It lay down there in the dark and let the low place fill, slow and sure, the way a hollow fills with rain. So they didn't dig him out. Think on that a moment. 9 men, and not one of them went back for their own. They built a wall instead. The whole crew, by hand, walled off the 60-foot drift over 3 days. They hauled native stone up the ridge and mortared it across the face, course by course, with their backs to the dark and their lamps set facing in. Nobody worked with the light behind him. Nobody would give that hollow his shadow. And the whole while, off past the fresh mortar, you could hear it. A slow, patient knocking in the rock, keeping time, like something counting the stones as they went up. Cobb laid the last stone himself, set it with his own hands, and marked it with a cross scratched by a nail. Then they climbed out, timbered the shaft mouth shut, and let the woods take it. Not one man ever named what was behind that wall. Every one of them carried it to his grave, the way you carry a stone in your pocket you're afraid to set down. The story got handed down the way these do, a grandmother's warning, said low over a cold hearth. A hunter's account, told once and not again, of warm air rising off cold ground on Blackjack Ridge of a winter morning, mist curling up out of the frost that smelled faintly of blood and wet iron. They say the wall still stands. They say if you put your ear to that old timber, you'll hear it. A slow, patient knocking, still keeping time, still waiting on the low place to fill. Some doors a man builds are not to keep him out. They're to keep it in. Next time you hear warm air moving over cold ground, you'll remember why they marked that stone.